Moms, what do you know about your child that you will never tell him or her? Viewers Edition. Story 1. I had a cat. His name was Oliver. Now, my mom wouldn't let me keep Oliver inside, so he was an outdoor cat. But we'd keep him in the tool shed at night because of the cold and possible stray dogs getting the jump on him. Tool shed had toys, blankets, and places for Oliver to climb to. Also had a litter box, his food, and water bowls. Now, usually me or my dad would lock Oliver inside, and one night after giving him dinner, my dad decided to leave the door open for a bit longer. I heard dog barks that lasted 2 seconds that night. I didn't hear any cat make any noises, so I didn't give it much thought, and it was late, way past his bedtime. He'd been missing since that night, and I have a feeling my parents had to clean his corpse so I wouldn't find out. They know it would have broken my heart since I loved Oliver so much. But if that is the case, I can only imagine what my dad went through because he decided to not close the tool shed when he gave Oliver dinner. I just hope that he ran away and is adopted by someone else. He was an incredibly friendly cat and would socialize with anyone, even if they just met. He was like a golden retriever in disguise, would never lash out on anyone, even when the nephews annoyed him. Story 2. That's exactly why I always make sure to be aware of where our pets are, especially in winter. Some cats like to crawl under cars. Fortunately, my car doesn't have much space between the wheel and the fender, so cats wouldn't hide in there. And I always back into a parking spot, so I slowly pull out of the spot in a relatively straight line. Even if a cat was hiding under the car, it would have a good chance of getting away with a good scare, but unharmed. Now, for the real reason I do things like that, always park your car so you can leave quickly. Be it stress or an emergency, you should be able to leave with as little effort and as safely as possible. Don't rev a cold engine. Leave the car idling for 10 to 30 seconds for oil pressure to properly build. Engage the clutch slow but swiftly while keeping revs low after you parked your car. Leave it idling for a moment before you shut it off. If possible, approach your parking spot with the engine nearly at idle speeds. This allows the turbo and other components to cool down and extends the service life of your engine. And naturally, always be aware of your surroundings. Be it pets or dangerous objects, make sure to not run over anything that isn't the road. Story 3. Similarly, I have a secret I've been keeping from my parents, and just the family in general. My Nana passed away in August, and it's been really hard. A while before she passed, we had a heart-to-heart talking about mental health and just life in general. I found out during that conversation that I was her favorite grandkid, and she loved me more than my little sister. She always treated us equally and never really showed any favoritism. If anything, my sister got more attention because I stupidly chose time with my now ex-boyfriend over weekend sleepovers at her house. My sister couldn't be there for the passing, and she's been having a hard time with it. I know it would be heartbreaking for my parents in particular, since she was so good about showing love to us equally. I feel so bad when I think about it, especially since I know my sister deserved her love more. But for some reason, she loved me the most out of every person in the world. She made it known she loved her grandkids more than my mom. Not because she didn't love her kid, but because us girls were her everything. It's been extra painful knowing I've lost the only person who always thought the world of me. Story 4. Story 32 and 33. Seppuku thoughts are delicate. There's no debate. If you disagree, ask about 800,000 people yearly how they felt. Getting to the point, sometimes it fixes itself. But it's better to either give them a note and stalk them so they don't try anything. By stalk, I mean when they read the note, act like you don't know so they don't feel as embarrassed. But check in on them more often than not. For 33, have fun with it. Go drill instructor mode and get creative with punishments. Vacuum or sweep the rain, assemble and disassemble something, sandbags, laundry, etc. Make him stack something from one area to another repeatedly. And my favorite punishment, work. Not as creative, but make it so. Make him do unnatural things that are just punishing, but not abusing. Cleaning gutters with a toothbrush, clean off the poop stains in a toilet bowl if you have any with a toothpick, have him do the dishes with only his hands and no sponge or rag, or even vacuuming with a dustpan and broom. Just tell him to do something. All these were on the fly, by the way. A few taken, but a majority thought from nothing. Story 5. Yes, keeping secrets from parents is not that difficult. If you do have physical evidence, hide it where no one would think to look. For example, I hide my stash behind my 2 fairly average-sized monitors. Everyone will look inside drawers and stuff, but everyone would be like, no one would be stupid enough to hide their stash in the open where it's easy to find, but that's exactly the point. I've been more careful about my stash as I was caught 4 years ago drinking because I was way over my head and drank too much, and I was visibly drunk in front of my mom. I was 16, and drinking or doing any types of narcotics is a huge taboo in India. From then on, I've been more careful not to buy too much at once so that it's easier to hide and use only when I need to. And also, I'm an introvert and I spend all day in my room. Story 6. My parents don't know how to parent. My brother was caught watching porn on his phone, and to them, that meant tell every person in the house about it, while also bullying him about it. Eventually, it got outside of the house, and he got really depressed because of how judgmental people were. Not sure if other parents do that, but just a tip, don't. Chances are your kid probably doesn't feel too great about it in any way, so rubbing it in their face is a little screwed up. He still has problems with it, and my parents still shame him for it. No, I haven't said a thing about it, but that's because my dad is a 6'7" Goliath who was a sergeant in like 3 wars. Fun fact, former sergeants can make the manliest of men simultaneously pee and poop themselves. He's scary. Story 7. Yes, you would swell up like a balloon if your bladder is big enough. The air going past the sphincter would also feel really weird, hurt and good at the same time. If you take the nozzle off the bike pump and insert the tube all the way in, it literally sounds like you're inflating a ball. I know this because I did it as a kid, and not only did it feel incredibly good, but my lower belly up to my belly button swelled like a balloon, and I was amazed at how big it got. Thankfully, my mom does not know, and it's totally not a case of her just not telling me. If you catch your kid doing it, just have a conversation about why it's bad for him. Story 8. My cat was 4 when he was run over by a car. He was my little void baby, and even though he moved in with my sister, because my apartment was no pets allowed, I still saw him as my cat. He was called Mr. Sniffles, because my stepdad is practically insane, and called him that because he sneezed on him as a kitten. He was the only one out of his siblings we didn't want to sell. I still follow his brother's owner on Instagram because he's my favorite choker that got his dad's Maine Coon genes and his mom's tuxedo fur, just fluffier. I think my cat had a different father though, a curious little black cat that stayed across the road behind a bush watching me. Story 9. I have a similar story, although I was the baby being thrown. My mom and dad were resting on the couch and slowly drifting off when my dad had a violent twitch in the arm he was holding me in. This twitch catapulted me across the living room to the kitchen, a pretty far distance, and I landed square on my head on the stone floor. When they came to get me, extremely worried, they found that I wasn't injured at all, and that instead of being even remotely sad or something, it seemed like I had fun from it. I was smiling. Too long didn't read. My dad had a twitch, which caused him to throw me like a football, and I landed on my head. But I had fun. Story 10. To be honest, to be a fascist isn't as bad as being a Nazi or a Marxist. None of them are good, by the way. But from what I've seen, fascists are generally less radicalized than the latter, do not believe in racial nonsense like Nazis, and hate driven class social divisions that Marxists champion. Sometimes it's even hard to tell them apart, as they all dress in black and go out into public looking for fights. I think just about the only thing for fascists is they normally do not draw red revolutionary-style flags like the others. Sometimes they're the same thing, like the Russian soldier recently captured in Ukraine with a Marxist anarchist A on the front of his chest, but a Nazi eagle swastika on his back. Story 11. I didn't realize I had a third nipple until I was 19. I have a lot of moles that are a similar color and slightly raised, with a few hairs growing on them because I'm a hairy man. It wasn't until I was reading about supernumerary nipples and how they follow the milk line that I realized it was directly in the right spot to be one. And lo and behold, upon closer inspection, the hairs around it had started getting thicker at the end of puberty in the same pattern it does around men's normal nipples. I always thought third nipples were more nipply and less mosquito bite bump, so it completely flew under the radar for me for years. Story 12. The child who is donor conceived needs to be told from birth. So many studies show it is beneficial for the child to know the truth from the start. That said, I also think the boy who was conceived through non-consensual means should at least be told assuming he has a different father for medical reasons. It would be more difficult though. I was raised by my grandparents, not related to my grandfather, dad's mom's second husband, at all. And I can tell you it's definitely possible to love two people who fill a similar role. My grandfather adopted my dad as a baby, and both were fathers to me. Story 13. Many years ago at a family get-together, my aunts and uncles started picking on the youngest uncle with the old joke that he was the accident, since he was my grandfather's 7th kid. My grandfather, who was pretty far into his whiskey bottle by this point, decided to chime in and tell everyone, "You're all different forms of failed birth control. We tried condoms, we tried the pill, none of it worked." To this day, I wonder if he was just having some fun at their expense and saving the youngest, or if he was really telling the truth, as birth control in the 50s and 60s wasn't that reliable. Story 14. This is actually a story of everyone but the parents knowing. My parents' friend has a son who married a woman from a traditional Catholic family. They had a formal wedding at a Catholic church that I was there for. What her family doesn't know is that the two lived together for a while before being married, which is a big taboo for the Hispanic households that was big about honor and purity. I'm sure that will come out eventually, and they will be upset for a little while, but that was already long in the past, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Story 15. No, that's not stupid at all. A life insurance company doesn't want to cancel the policy unless it's likely that the policyholder is near the point of unaliveness. Otherwise, it's just passive income that they will hopefully continue to take in indefinitely. It's best explained as a bet with the company that you'll die before the policy expires. Although the company took the opportunity to cancel it, the missed payment was just the opportunity they needed to do it legally. If the payments had continued, the agency would have been obligated to honor the policy for the agreed-upon duration. Story 16. Story 31, you realize if you give him gold, he can see who gave it to him and find your profile through that. Especially if you have done so multiple times. Can't wait for a follow-up. My parents think I don't know they stalk my social media accounts. Edit. If this is true, which I hope it is because, man, the memes from this. Edit 2, another follow-up title. My parents spend money on giving me internet gold rather than getting what I ask for during Christmas. Story 17. Bipolar disorder is not something you have a hair of, or a mild case of, or is slightly bipolar. You either have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, or you do not. Person A may respond to lower doses of a medication than person B needs to take. Person B may need 2 psychotropic medications, while A only needs 1. Person A may have better coping skills. Person A may not have other mental issues, such as PTSD. That does not mean person A is only a little bipolar. Story 18. I once bought a corn DVD to put in my small safe at home, then left the safe slightly open. My stepdad, being a butthole, couldn't resist the opportunity to peek. So until he divorced my mom, he and her privately knew that the safe was there, and it was where I kept my corn, and put it out of their minds, rather than what I actually kept in there, which was all my chocolate and sweets. They never found out, and I never actually watched that corn video. Story 19. My mom doesn't respect me enough to tell me what happened to our cat. After a decade of wondering and being angry at not getting a straight answer, I found out from someone else. She got tired of the cat not passing away, and no one wanted to take in a senior cat, so she decided to return the cat and dropped it off at the house of the people we got her from. She doesn't know I know, and I just don't trust her to be honest with me if I told her. Story 20. I have a similar story, though it didn't involve my cat getting run over. My cat was a bit overweight and had gotten sick. We took him to the vet and they did some procedures that would help him, but since he was overweight, the anesthesia they used during the procedures had ended his life. The idea that we could have prevented the poor guy's unaliveness by feeding him better and getting him some exercise is painful. Story 21. Tell him about the postpartum depression. My wife currently has it. It's horrible. It's our second child. She keeps thinking that something's wrong with her. She gets help, and it gets better over time, and I know she will love the second as much as the first. But tell your son it could happen to his future wife too. People need to know that postpartum depression is real, and that it's just pure bad luck if you get it. Find help. Story 22. That life insurance one must have been devastating for the mom. Imagine you're leaving this world and all the years spent preparing so your family is safe goes away because of said family. Passing away and leaving them without any support in an unsure situation over a Swiss cheese diagram type of mistake. Also, that chosen one is why, as a pet owner, I always make sure I know where my cats are and never assume. Story 23. When I was 9 and my younger brother was 6, We thought our older brother, 12, was brain damaged for no particular reason other than he put his toothbrush away upside down. Flash forward 3 years, our family can barely afford groceries because my dad needs to buy him pills with the rising prices. It has nothing to do with the video, but I think I should capitalize on my psychic powers. Story 24. Is number 34 my gender but backwards? Okay, so I was in an accident, and I found out at the beginning of 6th grade that I was, and I was asked very awkward questions to figure it out. And my older sister is still a question. My parents were broken up for a short amount of time, like a month. My dad got together with my sister's mom. I still have no idea how my dad got with someone so quickly. I'm 26. Story 25. I totally believe your real dad is the one who raises you, but keeping from your child that they are not biologically yours can open a big can of worms. I know a girl who found out her dad wasn't her bio dad in a similar way. Her mom was on the phone with her grandma and she mentioned it. She was a wreck afterwards, not to mention the possible health complications. Story 26. I have a similar story. According to my parents, we were visiting a farm or something for an event one day, and they were offering goat milking as an activity for the kids. However, I apparently tried to milk the wrong goat and was very confused when no milk came out. Turns out it was a boy goat. My parents still laugh about it. Story 27. You know what is really stupid and selfish? That missing a payment cancels insurance. Only in America. There are dozens of ways to inform the client. They can even get the money through a judge. But no, canceling is much more profitable for the company, and it's legal in the USA. Capitalism at its finest. Story 28. I have a similar thing with Story 13. My parents wanted 3 children. After one failed attempt, my brother was born. After many, over 3 attempts, they had me. I wouldn't have been born under other circumstances. Also, my parents only have 2 children. Story 29. I've accidentally run over a cat that sped out onto the road before. You know if you're gone over a cat. It's not exactly a subtle bump. I guarantee after finding out Chosen had died, he knew it was him. Oh, and the cat I hit survived, so I'm happy that it was fortunate. Story 30. I was sort of unplanned, if you look at it that way. However, my mom always makes it known that I was not a mistake. I was a gift. I didn't have any problems with being unplanned as a kid, and it was more interesting to me than impacting. Still, I appreciate the support. Story 31. My son knows I didn't want kids, right up until I saw his 5-week-old rice-sized mini-me. I also tell him that he will always be the best thing his dad and I have ever done. He also knows I would not have more because I knew I would never love anyone or anything over him. Story 32. For real, my mom has been telling me the story of how I was born. She and my dad were messing around when they were in high school and upset me for the entirety of my life. It hasn't negatively affected me. In fact, I think it positively affected me. Story 33. My parents found extremely embarrassing stuff on my phone and confronted me about it. My dad shouted at me on WhatsApp for hours, and I feel bad about what I did now. I prefer not to think of it. It was only 2 years ago. Story 34. I agree. My mom told me I was unplanned when I was 12, and I don't think, if you explain the difference, it really has an emotional impact on a kid. It also makes a good story if you have an interesting way you were created. Story 35. Here's mine. I may not be a parent, but I am aware that this is highly likely to be the case. Your parents are more likely to know about your fetishes than not. Story 36. I always knew I was unplanned. I remember saying I was an accident when I was little, and my mom was like, "No, you were a surprise." Story 37. I found it weird my parents told me I was planned, yet abused me physically, and I had to be forced to live in multiple homes plus homelessness. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.